This is a sob story. Well, at least some of us are sobbing, just not apparently the blokes. 19% of Australian men, 1/5 of them say that they never cry. Add in the people who say they cry less than once a year, well, you've accounted for half of men. At least men won't admit to weeping even in an anonymous survey. Is it that boys don't cry, or they're hiding the tears in their eyes? It's a completely different story, though, for women, for whom the frequency of crying is far, far higher. 1/3 of women say they cry at least once a month. Add on another 14% who cry weekly, and then 3% say they cry at least daily. Here are two things men say they are more likely to do than women. One of them is gamble. 1/5 of men say they do that at least once a month. And swear. 56% of men say they use foul language at least once a day, while women are 3 times more likely than men to say they never use a naughty word.
Well, for more on this, we're joined by Associate Professor Simon Rice from the Centre for Youth Mental Health at Melbourne University. Simon Rice, thank you so much for your time. What do you make of the results when it comes to boys versus girls when it comes to crying?
Oh, great to be with you, Karina. So the results that we're seeing that Casey's presented there are really consistent with what we've known from research for some time, that there are really quite profound differences in the prevalence, the incidence of males and females and their tearfulness and their crying. We know that, the best guess that we've got is that the reasons for this are a combination of biological, of psychological and socio-cultural factors, and there is a little bit of emerging evidence that suggests that testosterone might actually inhibit tears, but that's probably more of a hypothesis than fact at the moment. But there are some pretty strong socio-cultural reasons as well.
And so, is it necessarily a bad thing?
Well, it's interesting to unpack it. It might be the case that males express their sadness in very different ways. When we think of the ways that males, men and boys, are socialised, especially in Australia, there are strong messages around them being in control, managing their emotions and feelings, keeping them inside, and really trying to avoid situations where they're perceived to be vulnerable. And unfortunately, or as we know, crying implies a sense of vulnerability. We cry at really significant times in our lives, sometimes when we're very happy and joyful, other times when we're very sad and we might be engaged in conflict. But the cultural messages that men and boys receive really encourage them to cope in different ways. And it's possible that they may well be crying, but they're not prepared to endorse it or report it to others, even if it is anonymous, and they might be crying alone rather than in front of others because of a sense of shame and embarrassment.
Yeah, because I guess historically we've thought of, if men are crying, that it's a sign of weakness.
Well, that's historically what the narrative has been, and I think the ways in which men and boys are socialised continue to emphasise that, and we really need to challenge that assumption, especially in relation to associated phenomena like help seeking when things are getting really tough for males. And we know that males are much less likely to seek help and engage with help seeking services, especially for mental health. So if we start to provide role models that can start to shape that culture in a more flexible, a more holistic way, we might get improvements in public health as well.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask about that. What are the mental health implications here?
Well, they're really significant. So we know that the rate of male suicide is close to 3 times that of female suicide in Australia, and any suicide is an absolute tragedy. But we clearly need to be doing more to address the needs of men and boys and their mental health. And I think we need to think around tailoring our services in ways that are going to be more likely to engage them, in ways that are going to reach them in environments where they're working, living, playing, and making sure that we're able to keep them connected. And we probably need to do things slightly differently. I think offering more of the same is probably not going to boost the rates of engagement for men and boys. So we need to think quite innovatively about how we can do that.
Should we be worried about the 3% of women who say they cry every day?
Look, frequent crying could be a sign of an underlying mental health problem, or someone who's not coping particularly well. And so I think that could be a signal for an individual to seek some support, and if they are seeking support, then that's a really good thing. We know that people differ in their expressed emotion, and some people are more likely to cry very frequently. And if it's not particularly interfering for their daily routines, for their daily functioning, then it may well not be a particularly significant problem for them.
Associate Professor Simon Rice, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.